So we have come to the last and important law, parallelogram law of vector addition. Let us read it first. If two vectors are represented in magnitude and direction by the two adjacent sides, note this, of a parallelogram drawn from a point, then the diagonal of the parallelogram passing through that point will represent their resultant in magnitude and direction. So before I go to the law and explain it graphically, let us quickly remember what a parallelogram is. Parallelograms, as you know, in the triangle law, it was of course the case of three sides. It said AB plus BC. If we did like that, the resultant was this one. That was the resultant. And parallelograms are quadrilaterals. They are quadrilaterals whose opposite sides are equal in length and they are parallel. Similarly here, this one and this one, they're equal length and they're parallel to each other. So it's a quadrilateral of a particular type, and if these angles happen to be 90 degrees, then that becomes a rectangle, as you were aware. So here what this law says, let's see it in a broader diagram. There is no point seeing it here. So what this law says is this: I just construct a parallelogram this way. That is one side of a parallelogram. The other side, adjacent side, that is, you can see adjacent sides means side by side, neighboring, they are touching each other. So these two sides of the parallelogram, which are adjacent, they represent two vectors in magnitude and direction drawn from a point. That can be interpreted like this. This is the common point or common tail from which the two adjacent sides start. So one of them, if represents by OA, OA was one side, might be representing the vector P. The other side of the parallelogram is, maybe I can call it OB vector. OB, that is the side rather, and represents a vector that is Q. So I have come up to this, two vectors P and Q represented in magnitude and direction. That means the length OA represents magnitude of P, length OB represents magnitude of Q. Direction of OA, the same as that of P, direction OB is the direction of Q. By two adjacent sides, neighboring sides, drawn from a point, that is the point O, which means in simple words that the two sides representing the two vectors, they have a common tail. We just draw in such a way that both combining vectors have a common tail but different heads. Now see here in triangle law, what we need is that first one drawn like that, the first vector's head coincides with the second vector's tail. But in this case, the tails of both of them coincide. They start from the same point. And then you go for the construction. Yeah, diagonal of the parallelogram passing through the point. That point means the point O, the common point, the common tail of the combining vectors OA and OB represent the resultant in magnitude and direction. So we have to construct the parallelogram first, which we shall do now. So see what we are doing. We are just constructing the opposite sides, keeping in mind for a parallelogram, opposite sides are equal and parallel. So I do this. Similarly from B, draw parallel to OA, and that is meeting this at this point. You can see, of course, they are construction, we don't need them. So I'd rather use them in dotted lines. And here again in dashed line, you can see. After the construction, let me call the point where we have found the opposite end of O. That point I called C. And then go for the resultant construction, which I'll be using red ink as I have said before. So I join OC in red and give an arrowhead here. And this OC represents the resultant. Give me a moment here. As you can see that OC, this diagonal passing through the common tail of OA and OB represents the resultant of P and Q. So I should call this as my resultant R. And that is, once again, it means the P vector plus Q vector, the resultant of P and Q, that is the R vector. In my figure, of course, in the parallelogram OACB, this is my parallelogram's name, we can see adjacent sides OA plus OB.
Hello students, you got a glimpse of our video lessons through this small lecture. We have hundreds of lectures like this one covering various topics of advanced school level and intermediate physics in our website. They are exhaustive and often accompanied by elaborate diagrams to make concepts even clearer. They are taught with passion and sometimes with a bit of fun. So, at the end of the lesson, you have a commanding grip on the subject and you are ready for the board and competitive exams. Subscribe at physicsacademyonline.com to access video lectures of highest standard on various topics of physics.